Adams Archive.
Hello, you beautiful people, and welcome to the Adams Archive. My name is Austin Adams, and thank you so much for listening today. On today's episode, I have a discussion with Bryanna Robinson. Now, Bryanna is a social and political commentator, just like myself, and she has tons of great content, tons of great insight into plenty of different topics, including the moon landing, government operations and conspiracies, historical events, really interesting stuff. So Bryanna and I have a great conversation today. We jump into a ton of different topics, everything from the lost technology of Nikola Tesla and the utilization of modern energy and the death of language, the death of art. We talk about the moon landing, and she gives some great insight and points into. And we have a discussion about the Freemasons, the Rosicrucians, which was a cult essentially within the Freemasons that was founded by Sir Francis Bacon. And Sir Francis Bacon has a ton of deep dive rabbit holes that you can go into. Very interesting that we talk about every single one of those things and more today. So make sure you stick around to the end and go give Bryanna a follow. You can find her on Instagram at Bryanna, B-R-Y-A-A, or A-N-N-A, B-R-Y-A-N-N-A, X Robinson, R-O-B-I-N-S-O-N. So go give her a follow. I hope you enjoyed the discussion as much as I did. It was an absolutely great conversation. And without further ado, one ado, which is that leave a 5-star review, subscribe, and here's what I would ask of you. Something that you may not know about podcasts is really the only way. Social media, no matter how many millions of views my content gets, very little moves the needle when it comes to podcast viewership. So what I would ask of you is, if you enjoy this conversation today, send it to somebody you know. Tell them, hey, did you know this about Sir Francis Bacon? It's crazy. Have you ever heard about the Van Allen radiation belt? Have you just send it out to a couple of people and share the conversation, because it was a great one. It was an absolutely phenomenal conversation, and I know you and I know a bunch of people that you know will enjoy it as well. So please, if you enjoyed the conversation, share it with some family, share it with some friends, talk about it with your coworkers, and give them the link. All right? Now, subscribe, leave a 5-star review, and let's jump into it.
The Adams Archive.
I was sitting in an hour of traffic, so.
Oh, geez. Yeah, that's that California traffic. That's a little different, huh?
Yeah.
You probably didn't have that where you were before. Where were you before?
Waco.
Wow, that's an interesting one.
Yeah, well, I grew up in California, so I'm
Okay.
back home. I was only in Waco for 3 years, so
Got it.
yeah, whole town vibes for sure.
Yeah, 100%. How is that? Like, is there any discussions about the Waco situation in general there? Is there like whispers of it still? Does it still kind of linger at all?
Like
Or
the David Koresh stuff.
yes.
People don't really talk about it. Like, Waco's moved on. If anything, they talk about. So I was talking to a local at the site, and he was talking about how the Clintons were involved and how Bill Clinton actually gave the kill order when they burned down the compound and killed everyone. And he was telling us all about how Clinton and Bush would go to this house that was like just a couple miles away. And I verified this, by the way, on the maps. He said it was covered in pine trees, like dense pine trees all around the house, kind of weird. So you couldn't see in, and they would go there and engage in Epstein-style activities, apparently. David Koresh got caught with a bunch of CSAM, which is child pornography, in the basement of his compound. So I have a feeling David Koresh was kind of in on, or at least knew about what they were doing. And so there was a point of contention there. And so this guy was telling us that, and I can't verify his story. Obviously, I can only tell you what he said. But he was saying that Clinton was involved in what the ATF was doing, how they came in and were shooting up the compound. And he gave the kill order from the water tower down the street, which you can still see. Yeah, just crazy story.
Wild. So David Koresh was the individual that was kind of the head of the situation over there in the house that they were in. And so the idea there would be that they kind of had some sort of high level safe house over there that they were doing, like you said, Epstein style activities. And was David Koresh potentially in the know? Is that why the idea is that Clinton sent the order?
I mean, if CSAM was found in his basement, I would think that he probably was part of that operation at some level, or at least knew what was going on, because Clinton and Bush obviously knew who he was. Bush has a ranch in Clifton, which is probably like 20 minutes outside of Waco. So he comes to town often. And Waco was actually supposed to be the Freemasonry capital of Texas. So they have
Ooh.
like a huge temple there. And another local was telling me that apparently there's tunnels from like Baylor and like all through downtown and stuff. I don't know if that's true or not, but there's definitely some weird stuff going on in Waco.
Yeah, absolutely. The Freemason one's a really interesting one. So I would say my gateway drug into conspiracies. So when I went into college, I was in just a normal history class. It was like American history, a certain time period to a certain time period. It was like some time period to 1987 or something, like right around the founding fathers time period. And when I was reading through the books, the textbooks that they had, they mentioned the Freemasons maybe like 2 to 3 times. So when I had to write my final paper for the class, I decided to write it on the Freemasons. And so I did like I have a like 25-page paper somewhere on the internet somewhere that I wrote about the founding fathers and the Freemasonries that were actually, so there's this whole crazy situation that brought me down a rabbit hole with Sir Francis Bacon and the idea that he was one of the, have you ever heard that idea? Do you know who Sir Francis Bacon is?
I've heard the name. You have to
Okay.
remind me.
So there's some really interesting situations around Sir Francis Bacon. Sir Francis Bacon has a rap sheet of conspiracy theories behind his name. So he was actually the founder of the Rosicrucians. The Rosicrucians is like there's a book that was basically written called the My Chemical Wedding. And the idea is that it was basically this kind of cultish situation, even within the Freemasonries. And Sir Francis Bacon is, if you follow the founding of the country, there's like little seeds that have been planted that all allude and point back to Sir Francis Bacon. He's a crazy character. Some people believe that Sir Francis Bacon, because William Shakespeare was like a pen name. Some people believe, based on the idea of who they thought, like who Shakespeare was, that the person behind his writings, the person behind the plays, because Shakespeare, as they knew him, was not nearly as educated to write the plays that he wrote, to have the style of writing that he wrote. So some people believe Sir Francis Bacon was behind the Constitution. He was behind the William Shakespeare, and that he was actually the head of the King James version of the Bible.
Interesting.
It's one of the wild. So I started on Freemasonry, which is crazy in and of itself to realize it's some 85% of people who signed the Constitution were Freemasons.
Yeah.
But when I took that road, I found this name, Sir Francis Bacon. And then I read My Chemical Wedding of the Rosicrucians, which was a kind of like subculture, weird, esoteric cult within the Freemasons that he founded. And then that took me down that whole rabbit hole. So this one man, people believe, could have been responsible for all of these different things based on his background. It's one of the wildest, coolest, craziest conspiracies that you can go down. And it's absolutely unbelievable. But that was like the like I said, the gateway drug, the marijuana of my of my conspiracy journey was the Freemasons down to Sir Francis Bacon. And I somewhere on my iCloud, I still have the Chemical Wedding PDF file of the book. I'll have to send it to you. It's pretty wild.
Yeah. I'm going to have to look into him. What an interesting character.
Yeah, it's crazy. And so there's all of these different things that, like, some people believe he was like formally trained under the Queen. Like the Queen had determined that she, in some way, shape, or form, came into contact with him at a younger age. And she basically like brought her under her wing and gave him all of these mentors and all of these linguists and all of these like mentors, and like raised him up from a very, very young age because she saw something in him. And eventually he did all the things that I just talked about, allegedly. When you talk about, and there's even some theories when it comes to the King James version of the Bible, and there's actually some very interesting comparisons between the Rosicrucian belief system, which is actually completely intertwined with the Freemasonries. Really, really interesting stuff. So yeah, that was my gateway drug. What was your gateway drug into conspiracy theories? What was the very, very first one that was like, damn, this all might be true?
When I was like 10 or 11, my dad made me watch Food Inc.
Hmm.
And have you seen that one?
No.
Okay, well, it's all about our food system, and it goes
Okay.
into like Monsanto is trying to monopolize the food industry, the farming industry, and Oprah's connection to it and all of that. So that was like my introduction to the world is not what it seems. And I remember being so like spooked after watching it. So I was a child. And so I guess from then on, you kind of see the world differently and you kind of question things. And then as I got into high school and in college, I was listening to like Charlie Kirk and Steven Crowder, Candace Owens, and just kinda keeping my ears open to all of that, but my dad had always been, like, a hardcore, like, Alex Jones fan, so he would have
Sure.
Alex, like, in the garage, and I'd kinda hear it, throughout the day and stuff. But it definitely started with Food Inc. when I was really young.
Interesting. It's so funny how it's like, I just went like super deep all the way, and then it's like seed oils, and there's so many different ways to finding this. And the funny thing about that is there's an interesting, like, if there's a Venn diagram of political ideologies, and somewhere on the very big portion of the conservative or right of center, let's say, there's a big cross section between the people that were deemed for so long to be conspiracy theorists. And I hate even using that term. If you understand the background of it, was completely utilized as a way to delegitimize opinions that were obviously legitimate, as we've seen over the last, I don't know, 3 years or 4 years, as everything's coming out from COVID and everything. But I don't understand why, because if you go back, let's say 20, 30, 40 years, 50 years, even back down to the 70s, the conspiracy theorists were always the hippies, right? Like the dirty hippies, the guy on the corner with the cardboard box
Yeah.
sign saying like they're all, the government's after you or whatever it was, the world's coming to an end. Like the OG conspiracy theorist was always like some dirty hippie. And then you go back and you actually look at the ideologies of the hippies back in the 70s, and the movements that were happening, the anti-war movement, the anti-Federal Reserve movements. And even to this day, people think of hippies in like this negative, weird light, which was totally a great psyop by the propaganda machine of the 70s. But it seems like there's been this huge pendulum swing from like the dirty hippies of the 70s, quote unquote, to the conservative movement that's normally like suit and ties. And, there's the Venn diagram is totally shifted from one side to the other.
Yeah, absolutely, and you see it a lot here in California because people are so health conscious in Southern California. You have a lot of those, like, classical liberals who are more, like, socially liberal, but they're very hippie and they're very, like, in tune to, like, what's going on with the food and stuff, and for a lot of them, the food is the gateway drug that gets them into politics and gets them to stop voting Democrat.
And you go back, like the food, you go all the way back to the food pyramid. You want
Mhm.
to talk about the deepest of middle school conspiracies. I remember being in health class and them teaching us the food pyramid. And at the very bottom of the food pyramid was potatoes and bread. And at the
Yeah.
very top was meat. They
Yeah.
were trying to convince you. It was like they're even the same way that they still try to convince you they have cereal for breakfast. It's like the big industry that is behind the Kellogg's, the Kraft, which all the way goes back to maybe like 3 or 4 major organizations, right? You talk about BlackRock, Vanguard, that owns every single one of them, like they own every single other thing in the world, essentially. But you look back and you look at the amount of money that was pushed to peddle the idea that egg yolk was bad for you, cholesterol was the devil, and that you should be eating frosted flakes for breakfast. It's absolutely crazy, right? It was in a textbook. It was in our
Yeah,
textbooks growing up. The food pyramid was
like,
the
lobby
biggest gateway.
yeah, to, like, get people
100%.
that's it's yeah, they brainwashed an entire, I think, 2 generations now with that nonsense.
for sure. And so I saw something today that I actually reposted. There's Matt Kim. You know who Matt Kim is?
Yeah.
Okay, Matt Kim, brilliant. Love his style because it's very just like I tend to be very animated. That's just my personality, and most people that get online and talk are. But he's very just calm, cool, and collected.
Super simple.
100%. He does a great job. But he posted something today, and it showed that Jeff Bezos' grandfather was actually a part of DARPA. And so
Wow.
DARPA being the government organization that was responsible for creating the internet. And for some reason, when I think of all of the Silicon Valley elites, the Mark Zuckerbergs, the, fill in the blank, the Jack Dorseys, the Google, whoever that guy is somewhere in a mansion, whenever you think of those people, I always think of there was something that there always seemed to be some sort of tie back to like big money, right? Everybody wants to say all these Silicon Valley executives, they were at one point some 18-year-old innocent guy in a garage with their best friend. And
Yeah.
and everybody wants you to think it was like the pulled themselves up by their bootstraps. They left Stanford. They created the biggest organization in the entire world. But when you look at it and you see that almost all of them got venture capital backed money, they got investment funds from the largest VC organizations in the world. And you realize that the same way, and this was something I always thought that the reason I bring them up is because I always thought Jeff Bezos was like the safe one. I was like, oh, he was the one that grinded it out. He started with books. I don't know if you remember. Do you remember when Amazon was just books?
Was it?
So you don't, oh my God. We're gonna learn you today.
When I heard about Amazon, I was like a child and someone got me a gift card and I was like, what is this?
Okay. So I'll give you a lesson here. So Amazon was originally only books. The
Interesting.
only thing that you could buy on Amazon was a book because you always had to go into Barnes and Noble, or I don't even remember the name, Barnes and Noble and
Borders was the other one here in California.
Borders.
Yeah.
That's what it was. Borders and Barnes and Noble. And you had to go in and buy books. And so what Jeff Bezos did was he created an online platform that you could just buy books from other people. And it was basically just a spreadsheet essentially where you could go look up your book that you wanted. Somebody else would post it and then you would buy it off of them, or you would buy it from the bookstore eventually. That's what it ended up turning into. But Amazon was just books for the like probably its first 5 years or so. And I only know this because my aunt was like the biggest book nerd growing up. And so I just remember her raving about it. And she thought it was the coolest thing that I don't even have to go in and buy books. But it started as only books. That was the only thing that you could buy on Amazon. And what he did is he utilized that as a way to build a system, because the only thing like Amazon doesn't sell anything. Amazon is
Yeah.
just a logistics company, right? They're just warehouses and trucks that take things from point A to point B. But it all started with books. And so I had this idea in my head, and we'll get back to the DARPA internet conspiracy here in just a second. But I had this idea in my head that Jeff Bezos was like, the one who really did it right. And it wasn't the Mark Zuckerberg who got this big VC funding from Silicon Valley, dropped out of Stanford or Harvard or wherever he's from, and he made it, right? He was the billionaire who like did it the right way. And I saw that today and it like blew my mind a little bit because every single one of the tech CEOs that got millions, like tens of hundreds of millions of dollars of backing from big money. But they want to give you this idea, being entrepreneurial myself, I've had like several businesses throughout my life and I enjoy coming up with an idea and creating it. And you have this idea in America that you're just going to create $1 billion business. But in the same way that you have to get through the gatekeepers when you go to Hollywood and you want that role to be an Avenger, you got to get through Harvey Weinstein.
Mhm.
You have to go through that checks and balances of the Silicon Valley world. Like you have to be the only thing that's probably more liberal than the Hollywood world is the startup world.
Oh yeah.
And I've realized that over the last several years. And Jeff Bezos was not safe. So his grandfather actually was a part of DARPA, who was one of the founding military organization that started the internet to begin with. And he does a podcast. I think it was with Lex Friedman. And he does a podcast where he talks about how, oh, he grew up on this farm and he raised cows and chickens and his grandpa raised him. But then, now, as of today, that he was actually running DARPA and creating the internet. And then somehow magically, he just so happens to find himself in a $1 trillion business
Yeah.
25 years later.
Like Taylor Swift, right? She says, "Oh, I grew up on a Christmas tree farm and I had this cute little humble country life." No, no, no. Her dad basically bought her way into her career.
Exactly. And that's what all the Swifties like seem to forget so
Yeah.
quickly.
Yeah.
Like Taylor Swift and I, you hear her music. There's very little talent there. I don't know. Maybe some people think that she's talented. I don't know. I like country music. She started out in country, but she was absolutely, when you go to her show, people don't talk about how amazing her singing was. They talk about how amazing the production is.
Yes.
There is tens of millions of dollars of marketing and production and pyrotechnics that make her show what it is. Because if it wasn't that, she would be very undifferentiated from any single girl standing on the side of Broadway in Nashville right now with a guitar, singing a song that you would probably walk past without giving $5 to.
Yeah. No, she's a good songwriter. Like, I'll definitely give her that. She's talented with her lyrics, but as far as like the music goes, everything sounds the same. The storylines are all kind of recycled now. And like you said, like I'm not gonna say she can't sing, but she's not the greatest singer.
Yeah. Right.
And it is truly all about the show. Yeah.
Yeah, it's this huge production. There's like my daughter, I have 3 children. My daughter watched like the most recent Taylor Swift movie that came out or documentary or whatever. And it's just like the most unbelievable, more fireworks than at Disney on the 4th of July. Like it's this huge, crazy production. She changes outfits like 12 times throughout the night. It's this crazy, unbelievable, huge marketing machine, which I think speaks to like the way that with enough money behind anybody, we talk about gatekeepers, enough money behind anybody, enough money behind any idea, enough money behind any single individual in the music industry, or, even if you look at, I don't want to say, what's his name? Post Malone, right? You go
Oh,
back and have you seen the video of Post Malone, his like very first video that he did?
I don't think so. Like music
Okay.
video?
Oh yeah, yeah. He posted this. It was like from his very first video, and I actually like Post Malone. I think he seems like a very genuine dude. I listened to his like 4-hour podcast on Joe Rogan, but he seemed like he seems like he did it right. But you go back and you look at like his very first video that he did, and it was like the funniest, most ridiculous, talentless video that you could ever imagine. It's great though. It's great. It's great to see where somebody can start and go. But the point in all that being, whether it's Hollywood, whether it's the music industry, whether it's the Silicon Valley VC startups, whether it's whatever, even you go into the news industry, every single one of these organizations has a gatekeeper at the very top of it that decides, are you gonna make it, or are you going to like, and really when it comes down to, are you going to make it? It means, are you going to play by the rules of the game?
Mhm. Which makes me, you know, I don't trust Elon Musk at all. And I get a lot of crap from people about that, but I don't think you can get where he is without playing by their rules. And he wore, it was a couple years ago, I don't remember the year exactly, but he wore a white tux to the Met Gala for his debut with Grimes, his girlfriend. And on the back, it said Novus Ordo Seclorum, which means New World Order in Latin. I don't know if you've seen that, but yeah, there's that. I don't think they would allow him to buy Twitter, like one of their biggest tools, one of their biggest means to control the population. I don't think they would just be like, oh, yeah, sure, you can have that.
Right.
If you look at Agenda 2030, one of their pillars for the New World Order, for the Agenda 2030, is social media and social credit scores. And they have specifically the Twitter logo on there. And people like to forget that this is a thing, but he was a young global leader for the World Economic Forum. So I don't think that he's the good guy that people think he is. I think he's playing the part at the moment. And acquiring Twitter to me is, even for selfish reasons for him, I think it has to do with his projects with transhumanism. Like, he's collecting massive amounts of data on the public right now.
Do you know about his mother?
Yeah, I've heard a little bit about her and also his babysitter. That's kind of an interesting one. I don't know if you've seen her videos.
I have not.
Yeah, I think they got taken off the internet at this point. So I was telling people to go find them, and they're like, "We can't find them." Her name is Rosemary, and she claims that she was his babysitter when he was a kid. And she was telling the story about how she was babysitting him, and I don't remember all the details, but basically would go into these like demonic realms with his like friends who were demons. And then at one point he tried to pull her in and it like terrified her. And I guess there's talk about like the parties that his mother would go to being not Epstein style parties, but with that crowd, basically. Yeah, interesting stuff. And I think part of what the babysitter was saying was that wish I could find the videos again, that he is set up to be like an antichrist type figure or something like that. That they chose him for that and he's been raised for that. I don't quite remember. But yeah, really interesting.
Well, I think when you talk about that, like, right, transhumanism, which like is something that Alex Jones, right, has been beating on the drum of for 10 years. His accuracy percentage on conspiracies to reality is so ridiculously high that it's unbelievable. And so he's been talking about the transhumanism, which is essentially the idea that humans are going to eventually turn into something other than what they are today, right? Whether it's through the utilization of technology, which is exactly what Elon Musk is doing. You want to talk about the potential, and I've gone back and forth on Elon Musk, right? I love the idea that Elon Musk bought X or Twitter for the complete purpose of freedom of speech. But when somebody is doing something that, and you should take this ideology and utilize it in your everyday life. When somebody is going completely out of their way to do something that is completely out of the norm, that is so gracious and kind, and you should at least be a little bit skeptical as to the reason why. Just a little bit. That's not to say there's not great people out there. That's not to say that there's not nice people who are maybe going to do very kind things for you above and beyond the norm of what is acceptable or appreciated today. But when somebody spends $40 billion, whatever it was, $40 billion, but I don't know what the figure was, something like
Yeah.
that, to champion freedom of speech, it's like, yes, absolutely. But there is that seed of skepticism that it speaks to exactly what you're talking about, especially when the same person that's doing that is getting access to not just you got to think of it from his perspective, not the perspective of the user on Twitter. From his perspective, he just purchased the rights to every thought that anybody has ever posted from their fingertips that was a direct projection from their brain into a platform. He just purchased a spreadsheet of 80 trillion thoughts, whatever the number is, right? And especially when that person is going to create and did create actively, simultaneously, while purchasing the rights to the freedom of speech platform, also implanting microchips in people's brains.
Yeah.
And there's so many different problems with that when you take that to like the even 10 years from now. And I think they actually ended up having some concerns about the guy that they just implanted it in, where they were looking at potentially pulling it out because it wasn't something that was life threatening. But that just seems like a terrible idea.
Yeah.
So when that same person is purchasing the rights to let's say 5 trillion thoughts, and that same person is looking to actively insert a microchip into every person's brain, and also claims that if you don't do this, you're going to get left behind, right? You're going to become obsolete, I think was the term that he's used, is if you don't combine yourself with technology, you're going to become obsolete. Maybe you should question the real reason why they're purchasing however many trillion thoughts.
Yeah. And that's an interesting choice of words that he used. I don't know where you stand faith-wise, but the Bible specifically talks about in the end times, you're going to have to get a chip either in your forehead or in your left wrist, I believe, or left hand.
It's the mark of the
Um,
beast, right?
yeah, that you have to like scan or something like that in order to get food and to participate in life and culture. And then you have someone like Elon Musk actively creating something like that. And we're starting to see, the Amazon one. I was at the airport not that long ago and they had one of those stores where you just like walk in, and get what you want and leave and you like scan your hand. I think it is crazy. Whole Foods now, when I go into Whole Foods, you just like scan your hand. I don't do it, but it's crazy.
That's like, is that just a California thing?
Crazy.
That's
Yeah.
crazy. So
Yeah.
Amazon test piloted something just like that, and they claimed that they would use facial recognition or something to charge your account for like,
Yes.
and it was all AI based. Did you ever hear about that?
Yeah, I think that's what we're talking about, like
Okay.
one something.
So it's different than the wrist, where people would actually like have something implanted in their wrist, or they would scan their palm or something
Uh-huh.
like that. What this was is they claimed that it was all AI driven. They said that they would just basically do a facial recognition, and all you had to do was scan your face into their system. But what it actually was, and I believe they're getting sued for this right now. Amazon hired 25,000 Indian dudes in a warehouse to actively watch the video surveillance footage and sit down and mark down each individual person and every purchase that they made, because it was like the no checkout area.
Uh-huh.
You would just fill your basket and you walk out. And they were like, oh,
Yeah.
it's AI driven. And what they were doing is they were testing the idea, but they hired tens of thousands of Indians in India. And they basically had them read it, looking at your face and trying to match it against the database of what they had, and then charging you in the background. But they told everybody it was AI driven. It was like the
What?
the, the craziest. Yeah, yeah. A little different than risk scanning, which again is its own set of problems. But yeah, nonetheless, a pretty wild idea as we move into this you know new era of AI. While meanwhile, it's just some guy sitting there eating chips and
I know.
and watching your face, looking for your social media profile to charge you or whatever.
Right. They should get sued for that. That's insane.
Absolutely, definitely false advertising, at least to say. So I've had this thought that's been lingering in my head, that when, especially when you combine the idea of AI and faith. And so here's my idea. We'll see how well I can actually convey it, because this is the first time that I've said it out loud. But my idea when it comes to this is that, if you are religious, you people out there listening, if you're listening, if you are religious, every thought that's been had ever, and where I stand spiritually and religiously, is I believe in God. I believe I have faith in everything. But what my thought is we are just as much a part of God, right? God, we are the seed of God, and God permeates the entire universe. And every thought that you've ever had, every decision you've ever made has in some way, shape, or form been at least slightly influenced by that greater power. And so when we look at the way that people are using ChatGPT today for creativity, for work, for art, for anything and everything that people are it's further just how they respond to their spouse in a marriage, for how they're opening up their Tinder chats. Like there's a literal GPT that is called Riz GPT. That is
Stop.
the guys.
Oh no.
Yes, it is a real thing. It's like the number 7 GPT on the GPT marketplace right now. It's called Riz GPT, and guys are using it to respond to girls on Tinder and try to pick them up or whatever. So when you think about the way that AI is being utilized, it is actually, and I think I believe that the way that when I have an idea, when I have a thought, especially something that think is powerful enough to act on, I believe that was given to me. I don't think I'm just this, I can come up with all of these amazing creative ideas. And I actually have a book somewhere, somewhere in the big long list of books behind me. It was written by Rick Rubin. And he talks about this idea. I think it's called the creative. I forget the name of it, but Rick Rubin wrote this book. It came out very recently. It's an amazing book, and it talks about the act of coming up with creative ideas. And he talks about the ether and how you have to be open to the idea and essentially be open to the idea that you need an idea. And through that, you will become almost like a receiver for ideas, right? And I think that's God. I think that's the universe. I think that's a higher power that is giving you this gift. That is an idea. That is a thought. That is a beautiful way of stating something. That is poetry. That is music. That is art. That is architecture. That is anything and everything that you could think of. But every single one of those categories right now is being replaced by AI. When you're talking about the way that people are responding to Tinder chats, when you're talking about the way that people are coming up with art with ChatGPT and DALL-E or Midjourney, there's so many things that would have normally been pulled from that ether, from the universal power, from the universe, from God, that is now being replaced by a man-made God, right? The way that we're anything and everything that you can think of right now, people are utilizing AI and they're using it in a way that is replacing the normal openness that you would have to receive it from something that is good, that is the universe, that is God. And we have since replaced that openness, replaced that power with something that is man-made by algorithms that are in the background being manipulated by Silicon Valley simps, weirdos that have never had a child, that won't ever have a child, that don't know what it's like to be in love, that don't know what it's like to enjoy art, that have just been in Stanford University classes their entire life and had wrote every single one. Like so that's my idea. That's my thought. It's very concerning to me that we're replacing that higher power with something that is man-made, and not just man-made, but man manipulated.
Yeah, it could be considered like a false god, like a golden calf. Totally.
Absolutely. And I think that to me is the most people are like, oh, our jobs. It's like, you're going to find a job. It's not like there's going to be 400 million homeless people in America.
Yeah.
Eventually, you're going to be able to utilize that. I don't think people are going to be replaced by AI. I think people who don't use AI will be replaced by people who use AI. That's my
Yeah.
thought when it comes to the workforce. But
Yeah.
I do believe that the ether, that the universe's, uh, consistent flow of ideas and creativity are absolutely going to be replaced by AI. And what you mean by AI is a man-made, exactly what you said, a false god that is manipulated by some 21-year-old guy sitting in a white cubicle in San Francisco.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's also going to dumb down the population a lot. I mean, we've already seen that with the internet coming in. I mean, today's kids, I don't mean to be disparaging, but they're not. I mean, look at the grades and they're barely making it through high school. Like, they're just not as smart as previous generations. I look back at like what my ancestors were doing. I've been doing a lot of like genealogy and family history studying. And like, gosh, people were so smart back then and they were really creative. They were like all entrepreneurs because they had to be. They could all like grow food and survive. They just had it going on. And these generations now, because we have all this technology and with the industrial revolution, everything is so easy now. And we're just kind of stupid. Like every generation gets dumber and dumber. And I really feel bad for, I mean, my future children and the generations after, like, they're not going to know how to do anything. I mean, my little sisters, like, they get to look things up on Google when they don't know how to spell a word. I had to go to the dictionary and like sound it out, like, and
Right.
that's not even, we're almost in the same generation, but yeah, I think it's going to make people really stupid.
Well, and you go back to, let's talk about the way the Bible was written, Sir Francis Bacon. You want to go back to the conversation about that, or even the Constitution, or the Federalist Papers, or any of those documents, the way that the people wrote, the way that people thought was so much more articulate, was so much more intelligent than the way that we speak today. I believe it was like 1984, by George Orwell. the idea is that you dumb down language so that you dumb down the way that people think. When you talk about language, you're not just speaking about language. You're speaking about the way that you're taking thoughts within your head, that the firing of those neurons and formulating them into organized thoughts that you can then convey, but you can't convey them until you have words for them.
Yeah.
And you look at the dictionary and the amount of words that we use today is a fraction of what people used back in the day. You look at even just penmanship, right? My handwriting looks like dog shit compared to all of like go back and look at any signature on the Declaration of Independence, of the Constitution, of any of these, the Federalist Papers. My signature, and I am probably sure any person's signature from my generation is just absolutely disgusting. They would think that we were mentally handicapped if you put me in a time capsule and had me sign the Declaration of Independence. They'd be like, that Austin guy was he like he was he was a neurodivergent hire for
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, like the way my grandparents, great grandparents, how they signed the card. Yeah, totally, totally different.
And that speaks to like, and again, you talk about the way that people speak and the way that people write, is that's just a projection of your thoughts.
Mhm.
You
So
look at go
the
ahead.
music industry and what's popular today, the TikTok trends, like everything is slang. If you don't use slang, you're like not cool. And then if I think about logos and branding, like graphic design has become so simple. And
Mhm.
I'm obsessed with mid-century modern design, but I think it kind of started there and it was intentional in the 50s, well, more so like the 60s, 70s, where they made everything super, super simple and minimal and everything with clean lines. And we see that. I don't know if you've seen charts comparing like the high fashion houses like Balenciaga, Chanel, Chloe, like how they all changed their logos to basically the same thing. Like Saint Laurent, Balenciaga, they all look the same now. It's black and white and it's simple text. It's all capital, very, very like corporate, I guess. And the art is gone. Like the art and fashion, the art and architecture, all of that beauty is just gone. And it's very communist Russia, if you ask me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great way of putting it. And you relate that the way that logos, even I haven't really thought about that, but I know that, I've been in marketing before. I've been a director of marketing in several companies, and the way that logos I haven't thought about that, but it's completely dummied down, right? It's all minimalist logos, right? The way that people utilize their brand identities today is all very, very simple. Like you said, that the color palettes of companies has been so minimized down to something so simple. Like you go back, you look at the way that Apple, even you look at Nike, you look at all of the largest corporate brands that are out there today. It's all very, very minimal. Like you said, very just simple lines and simple designs and simple colors and very simple color schemes. And you mentioned something there that's architecture. And for some reason, this is like one of the things that I'm so passionate about, and I have no idea why at all. But architecture to me, and I think it's probably because it's around you all of the time. And I point this out to people and they're like, oh my God, you're right. And I've never thought about that. Everything that we live in today, post World War II architecture, was absolutely the death of modern artistry. You go and everything around you, just look around you. I live in a box that has several boxes within it, that it has my computer's a box, the walls in front of me, the art, the everything around me is designed as a box. And you go to I was actually I was at a local theater show. It was a large thing, but it was like it's at the Fox Theater in Detroit. In the Fox Theater in Detroit, you walk in there and you see this with cathedrals. You see, I've been to the Notre Dame in Paris, and like you go over there and you see things that were built prior to the 1930s, and it absolutely blows your mind. And it's not because it's not just the visual aspect of what you are appreciating. It's like it's inside of you. There's something inside of you when you're in a beautifully built Gothic cathedral, or you're inside of the Fox Theater in Detroit, or the there's so many examples of this, but none of them were built post World War II. There
Yeah.
was a absolute that is a hill I will die on. The death of artistry, the death of consciousness, the death of almost any artistic pursuit died in the 1940s post World War II.
Yeah.
Everything.
Yeah. If you look at the homes like here in California, people pay insane amounts, I mean, millions and millions and millions of dollars for homes that look the same. Like you could pay 2 million for a house that looks like a house that's 10 million. It's the same black and white, 90-degree angled
Right.
box, like modern box. And they all have the fireplaces that are like in the wall. And like, it looks the same. Everything looks the same now. Yeah, there's no spiral staircases. There's no woodwork and wood paneling and like art, real art.
And it's not the death of art in itself, it's the death of consciousness.
Mhm.
It's like when you sit in a box, inside of a box all day, every day, and then you drive your box car to your box house, and then you fall asleep in your box bed, and then you wake up and you take a shower in your box shower, and then you drive your box car to your box work, and it's literally the death of consciousness, right?
Yeah.
Exactly, 100%. Like you talk about the death of language, the way that people spoke 200 years ago. You and I, if you dropped us into those time periods, like if we took a time capsule and pressed, you know, 1824, we would look like the biggest idiots.
We look like
And
cave.
right, exactly. And you're supposed to improve, right? You're supposed to become more intelligent. You're supposed to become more capable and learn from the past. But the way that they spoke, the way that they wrote, the way that they lived, the way that they built architecture and everything is absolutely the death of consciousness, the death of art, which is just a projection of consciousness and the projection of freedom and the freedom to create things. And you look at postmodernism, if you the idea behind postmodernism essentially being that there is no truth, right? You look at the modern art, and modern art is absolutely trash. Absolutely
Literal
trash.
crap. I think it was
Exactly.
like Balenciaga. It was like $800 for a handbag that was a replica of a bag of trash. Literally.
They're just rubbing it in your face.
Yeah. Insane. I don't know if you've seen, there's an article, and I'll probably make a video on it. So it's really fascinating, written in, I believe, the 1800s. And this man is talking about basically old world America. So the continent of North America, and how there are all these civilizations and these incredible buildings and these really advanced, intelligent people that he claims, used to live here. And there's kind of a growing number of people who are, I guess, waking up to this, that there was something more here than Native Americans and teepees and primitive people. But yeah, it's really fat what he says about old world America. And then we look at like the Chicago World's Fair and how everything conveniently got destroyed in a fire, and we don't have any of those gorgeous buildings anymore. But when you look at pictures that were taken of those buildings, they look like they had working electricity. And they were so intricate and so detailed and so massive. And they supposedly went up within a couple of months during a Chicago winter. And a Chicago winter is absolutely brutal. And we're talking about people who traveled by horse and buggy, who did not have heat, and who did not have, layers and layers of incredible winter clothing like we do now, that somehow built these incredible buildings that look like Paris and Rome, in a matter of a couple months in Chicago. But they weren't smart enough to like make a car back then.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's especially during the winter. There's absolutely zero way. Like I said, I live in the Midwest, and there's no way. There's absolutely no way that modern society they stop. They actually have frost rules. So if you live in a cold area like the Midwest, you cannot build at all. You can't. They won't let you. With modern construction, with all of the tools and the machinery that we have today, there is a certain amount of months per year where you literally you cannot build. It's illegal to build because there's frost rules, because the ground is so hard and too hard for the modern machinery or whatever for the government to allow you to build, which I don't know why they care, but yeah, absolutely unbelievable.
Yeah. So apparently these primitive people who grew potatoes knew how to do all this. And then of course it gets destroyed. And I think it kind of a deliberate, some people call it like a reset. And I think it's a deliberate destruction of that beauty and kind of the dumbing down of the people because it makes us a lot easier to control. And I see that happening again with mid-century modern. As much as I love mid-century modern design, I think they did it again then where they're kind of erasing like the beauty and the art and they're giving us a lot of geometry and clean lines, circles, squares, triangles. But yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah, and when you speak about that, you can go back thousands of years and feel the same way. When you go look at ancient Egypt, you look
Mhm.
at the architecture that they had then. We talk about Chicago hundreds of years ago. Talk about Egypt thousands of years ago. We still have no idea. We still have no idea how they built the pyramids, how they built the chambers within them, how they built the tunnels underneath them. I think there was an article that just came out, I believe today, that was about how there was a uh, finding of a new underground tunnel system that they believe could potentially lead them to the tomb of Cleopatra. And yes, just today, I'm pretty sure. And so, but they still don't know how these tunnels were built. They would not be able to build these tunnels today. And that's almost every single part of ancient Egypt. And so you have these people coming out, these archaeologists, and he talked about how there's absolutely zero way that modern technology would be able to build the pyramids as we know them today. The amount of precision of architecture, the way that they cut these blocks and allegedly dragged them thousands of miles. And then, so you talk about architecture and you talk about the elimination of, I don't know, almost like of of questioning these narratives. They want to stifle these ideas so much, whether it's hundreds of years ago or whether it's thousands of years ago. They just want you to live in your box. They don't want you to question why you live in your box or why there's just right angles everywhere around you that stifles creativity. It's a continuation exactly of what you saw within, to bring up 1984 again, the dwindling down of language to something that is verbally diminishing consciousness. It's aesthetically diminishing consciousness in the same exact way. So if you can do that to the surrounding areas that you're in constantly, to the thoughts that you're able to come up with from the, that ether, that God, that universal ideas that are dropped and planted into your brain, if you can make the individual, the language that they are only able to convey them through as simple as possible, then that person, to your point, is much more easy to manipulate. They're much more easy to make them just, toe the line of what's accepted and not push back against the institutions that are there, around them all of the time, that want them to do X, Y, and Z along the way. Right. And
Yeah.
so it's language, it's aesthetics, it's art, it's creativity, it's entrepreneurship. It's absolutely unbelievable the amount of ways that we have been manipulated into simplicity.
Yeah. Yeah. It's almost, it makes you numb, kind of. You're numb and you're very susceptible to whatever they want to tell you. And I don't know if you've heard of cymatics. It's the study of how frequency affects water. If you
I
look,
Yeah, I think
sorry,
I've heard of it. Like, I think I saw like a video on it at one point where I saw this like lady talking about it, but it was like the old Twitter, maybe 5 years ago. But yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
interesting. So you can affect the molecules of water but different frequencies. So music, even words spoken, and you can look up experiments that they've done on this, and you can see like when negative words are spoken over the water, how it destroys the water molecules versus positive words or songs like what did they use? Oh, Imagine by the Beatles or whatever, John Lennon. Yeah, so really interesting. But if you look at these pictures of these water molecules that are affected by positive frequencies, they look exactly like cathedral windows in like all across Europe. It's really fascinating. And I'm going to post something about it soon.
Wow.
But yeah, so it kind of gets you thinking like people back in the day, they knew something about this. Like they were very in tune with frequency and what was going on. I don't know if they knew about cymatics necessarily, but there was something to that. I don't know if you've heard of the Coral Castle down in Florida. That's an interesting
No.
one. Apparently, people think he moved these huge, massive stones. There was one man who created this garden out of rocks, and the theory is that he moved them with frequency. And they've demonstrated in a lab that you can pick things up and move them with frequency. They're doing it with like water droplets and really small things. But a lot of people think that this wasn't just the way the Coral Castle was built, but also possibly things in Egypt as well. I did a video on Egypt a while ago where I broke down like the official theory for the pyramids. They would have to move these, I think they're like 80-ton blocks each one. I think it's 500 miles from the quarry where they said that they got the blocks across the desert, put them into place in 2 minutes. You're going to move this giant block 500 miles and put it into place in 2 minutes. And you have to do that 24 hours. I think it's 10 hours a day for 20 years. You would have had to do that in order to finish the pyramids on time, according to the official timeline, the official story. Um, so yeah, it's possible they used frequency to build these things, and they obviously knew a lot more than we do.
And there was a video that came out, I think, where have you ever seen the one where somebody claps? Like if they clap in front of this Mayan temple down in South America, that it creates this like super weird frequency that it puts back on you that sounds like forget what it is, but it's a really the way that they understood frequencies hundreds, thousands of years ago is absolutely unbelievable. And the way that they were able to utilize them, that's almost every single theory. When you look at the people who are really at the mainstream, I guess mainstream is not the right term, but like the mainstream of the non-mainstream is the idea is that the frequencies, the vibrational, the utilization of those frequencies is the way that they were able to do a lot of the things that they did that we cannot explain today, which takes you to the idea that, the lost civilization and lost technology. Even if you go back several hundred years ago, you have Nikola Tesla. Nikola Tesla created tons of technology, some of which you can't even learn about today, some of which they isn't spoken about today. And a lot of it had to do with the frequencies, had to do with the way to utilize vibration and sound to manipulate the world around us. And so many people believe, and you have to understand that the timeline that we're on, the reality that we're on today, could have went hundreds of millions of directions. The people that we had, a part of the American population, a part of the world population, out of all of the potential sperm that could have created the world around us today, it's a very, very, very specifically small group from the group of potential beings that could have been here today. And so when you look at the science that has been created, the very, very small percentage of people that became people from sperm, the very, very small percentage of people that were born that went into science, and the very, very small percentage of scientists that created the science as we know it today, you're talking about hundreds of people, not thousands, not hundreds of thousands, not tens of thousands, not millions. You're talking about maybe the people that have created the world around us, the technology, the cameras, the phones, like really the core technology that created those things. You're talking about 50, 100, 200 people that created the core technologies as we know them today. And of the millions of potential people, the hundreds of thousands of sperm that decided to be the 1 or 2 to 200 people that we're talking about that created the scientists, that created the universe around us as we know it today, there could have been thousands of other people in their position. And there was those thousands of other people in those positions that created the science that we knew prior that was far different than the timeline that we found ourselves on today, that is electricity, that is, the gas stove that you use and the microwaves and the cell phones and the this and the that you know today. It could have been a completely one small one individual scientist could have completely off-railed us from the technological advancements as we know them today, to where we wouldn't be sitting having this conversation this way. And we wouldn't have the electricity that we have around them, but it would have been replaced by some other idea in some other way, just like what we're talking about, that is the lost technology of ancient Egypt and all of the things that we don't know about as a result of things like the burning of the Library of Alexandria.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's pretty crazy. There are a lot of people who actually think that the pyramids were used as power plants, essentially, and that our form of electricity that we use today is actually like a primitive form of electricity. And I would honestly agree with that. If we look at what Tesla did with Wardenclyffe Tower, he was harnessing energy from the earth and using it to transmit messages and images to ships all the way out at the Atlantic, in the Atlantic Ocean. Um, and he wanted to power up New York City with this clean, sustainable energy from the earth. And JP Morgan said nope. And he pulled his funding, and the tower was destroyed 2 years later. And you don't hear about that in school. You just hear Thomas Edison invented the light bulb, which actually, that was more so like Tesla's invention than Edison's. But yeah, I think we're living with primitive technology compared to what people had back in the day.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's like so many people are looking at what Tesla did now and like some of the schematics that were left around and things like that. But you pointed to it exactly, which is that Thomas Edison took essentially complete responsibility himself for all of the work of, I believe he hired Nikolai Tesla as his like basically his intern.
Yeah.
And Tesla died broke and like had no money, no fame to his name. And essentially, Thomas Edison utilized him as a pawn to steal all of Tesla's work and determined to utilize, I think, what was the certain type of like luminescent metal or whatever it is that makes up our electricity today. And that's how stupid we are. I don't know how my house is lit up today. Like we're so primitive. We're so dumb that we just expect all of these things to work when we want them to work. And we
Yeah.
just expect that daddy government's always going to take care of us, and whatever energy company that's out there just magically creates light around you. It's like, it's not God said, let there be light. It's
Yeah.
whatever the energy company is around you today is that entity that just, you don't have to know. We got it. Don't worry about it. And if there's a complete failure of the electronic or the power grid, well, good luck. You better have a lot of bullets or food. Yeah, not our problem. And there's so many people, like there's been so many movies lately, right? The Obama movie that he helped write that talked about the difficulties that you would run into if there was an EMP or like a triple apocalypse and I don't think too many people realize how quickly we could devolve into chaos.
Oh yeah. Lord of the Flies. Like,
100%. Even the Northern Lights that we've been seeing over the last few days, so many people have speculated, and I don't think I've jumped on this train quite yet. Me and my wife went outside and like used. I was able to actually see it with my eyes. My wife had to use her phone, but she got some amazing pictures of the Northern Lights. And again, we're in the Midwest, so not that crazy. But there was some people in Florida. That doesn't
yeah.
make any sense at all that you should be able to see these. And so some people were speculating that it was, potentially all of these, was the government operation, was it aliens, was it this, was it that? right? But how quickly some people were saying that even just a natural event, just a natural event like the northern lights or the solar flares that was causing it. And I guess the idea behind that, the scientific explanation was
Mhm.
that there was a essentially two large areas of the sun that combined into one that was 16 times the size of the earth that started to emit the solar flare energy that caused the northern lights to be able to be seen all across the globe. And
Or so,
or so they say.
yeah,
Exactly. But and so even that, they were saying a natural event could have been the cause of, well, you might just not be able to call your mom or your grandma. Your electricity might go out. You're this, you're that, all of these things. Don't worry about it. But if it happens, it's because of the sun.
yeah, it's not our fault.
Absolutely has nothing to do with us. But how quick, even if it's natural, which it's highly likely that if we do end up in some sort of scenario where there's lack of communication or our 5G towers, God forbid, don't work the way that they were intended, that it's, you know, if that does happen, the we saw it with the toilet paper. People get very primitive
Yeah.
very quickly. There is so much that if our and I am guilty of this too. If my cell phone stopped working tomorrow, like I would be driving to my parents' house, going to check on my grandparents. Like it would very quickly devolve into chaos. Just think about this. If all of the grid goes down tomorrow and the grocery stores cannot turn their power on, guess what they're doing? They're closing their doors.
Mhm.
Guess what your fridge is doing? Your fridge isn't going to work. And all of your food's going to go bad in 2 to 3 days. And if your food goes bad in 2 to 3 days and your grocery stores are shut down, just ask yourself that question. Then what? What am I
Yeah.
going to do?
And
That's
some
2 to 3 days.
in Texas, our water worked off of the electricity. So we don't have water when we don't have electricity either. So unless you have a well and you have a backstock of food, good luck.
And what type of again, there was people fist fighting over toilet paper.
Yeah.
Fist
Yeah.
fighting over toilet paper. Now imagine if that was water. And I actually remember when you talk about COVID, I actually remember going to the local store and buying the big jugs of water, like with that idea in mind. I bought like 5 or 10 jugs of water that I stuffed in the back of my car just in case. But it wasn't even a conversation then. It was toilet paper. Like people were fighting at Costco over toilet paper. And and that's not even a daily necessity. Like, I'm sorry, you can figure something out. Grab a
I always
towel,
wondered, yeah, about the toilet paper thing. Like, why toilet paper? We laugh about it, but I almost feel like I did kind of like a deep dive into all of these different patents that the US government has on, what do they call it? Voice to skull technology, basically ways that they can communicate with your brain, ways that they can change the frequencies in your brain, all that kind of really weird stuff. All of this stuff is patented, it's public information, really fascinating, but they can actually implant ideas into your head. So did they start this where they were like, get toilet paper, like did they send out
mm,
5G towers and everyone went crazy over the toilet paper? So weird.
yeah, and you look at it. So there's actually, so even if let's just say it was a real shortage, right? Let's just assume that it's very very easy to that for them to disrupt the supply chain. Right?
Mhm.
It's very, very easy for them to disrupt the supply chain. The amount of people that were running to the store based off of propaganda. All you need is every major Costco to not have toilet paper for then all of the Winn-Dixies around you, all of the Krogers, everybody that's around you is going to start sprinting to the store. Right. But then you get into what you're talking about. Right. I think there was a recent hearing about like within the last week, there was a hearing where they brought in the CIA and they talked to them about the more recent utilization and weaponization of the technology that you're talking about. and they talked to them about what used to be called Havana syndrome.
Mhm.
You heard of that before?
Yeah.
So Havana syndrome was, you go back to the utilization of this during like the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union back in the day, and you can look this up, CIA.gov, their reading room right now. And you can look at the weapons that they utilized to basically attack and disrupt the frequencies within your brain. And they created essentially like these like ray guns, like alien style ray guns that could shoot these signals at you and cause you to go crazy. They verbatim last week said that they could make you see things, that they could make you hear things, that they could change the thoughts that were within your head to be positive or negative utilizing this technology. And just think of the implications of that today. We're not talking about when you have a brain, a Elon Musk chip in your brain that they can then just go to their computer and go to a drop down menu and say, hey, I want Bryanna or I want Austin to be super pessimistic. Or not even that. I want every 24 to 35-year-old white person to become hyper aggressive just for a week. And then next week we'll turn it off. Well, whatever there's so many things that you could do with that technology. But even as we know it today, they're able to weaponize and manipulate human consciousness the way that the good Lord, the earth, the universe created it today, without a brain implant in there, not only being able to manipulate your thoughts, but you being able to track every single thought that you make at every single point of the day. They know when you're hungry, they know when you're happy, they know when you're mad, they know when you're horny, they know when you're thirsty, they know every single thing about you all of the time, every day, at all times. And guess what? They're going to sell that data to every company that's around you. And then guess what? They're going to project an advertisement in your brain. I think it might have been like the Minority Report or something. They showed the way that they would basically, there was no real like billboards, but every billboard, every thing that you would drive past would have it was actually a TV show on Netflix called carbon fiber or something, carbon something. And they had this chip in your head that they talk about in this show. And everything that you would walk past would be a personalized advertisement in real life that was specifically created for you. You walk down New York City, every billboard, every building, every screen, everything that around you was completely curated to your thought processes.
That sounds
And
like
it made it, exactly, it's terrible. Right. And again, what are the implications of that?
yeah. I don't know if this is going on YouTube, so I want to like censor myself, but the offing events that happen at school often, I was reading a post. This woman was talking about how all of these characters who do this report having voices in their head telling them that they have to do this in order to make the voice go away and to feel okay again. And so they go do this. And so I thought that was like it was a little out there. Like I need some proof for
Sure.
that. So then I was going through this list of probably like 100 different patents of this voice to school technology. And sure enough, there's a patent in there that it works so they need your DNA, which they can get from a piece of trash in your trash can out front or anything really. And then they can program using your DNA, their voice to only reach like your thought, basically through frequency. And so they can speak to you. So some guy from the CIA or the FBI is, on a mic speaking into your brain, telling you that you have to go commit this horrible act in order to get the voices to go away. And so you feel crazy. And so you go do this thing and then you end your own life and the story dies with you. But it's crazy because this technology actually exists. And it kind of makes me think about like, well, what about Trump supporters in the future? And like, how are they going to target us, with deep fakes and with voice to skull technology? And I don't know, it's a weird world we're living in.
It's crazy, right? And you think about 10 years from now and it gets into wild territory. But even what you're talking about today that most people aren't familiar with, and I'm not familiar with some of it, but it makes perfect sense to me. Even if let's go to the very, very generous side of that, which is psychological medications, the antipsychotics that almost 85+% of people are taking when they commit those unaliving events that you're talking about at the school systems. Almost every single case, they're taking antipsychotics. And if you just look at it as biological, there is a switch inside of your brain that says, I would never commit this atrocious act. Even if you want to talk about like what we used to do back in the day, where there was a lot of murder, there was a lot of war, there was a lot of rape, there was a lot of pillaging, there's all these horrible things. Absolutely, for sure. People and humans are capable of very, very bad things on their own without psychological medications or without technology that manipulates their thoughts. Absolutely capable of those things. But when you look at the effect of psychological medications and that switch in your brain that says, I would never go do this to children. I would never go do this to innocent civilians. I would never go do this to X, Y, and Z. Fill in the blank. There is a switch in your brain that has to be muted, completely silenced. The same way that when you become hyper majorly depressed, that there's a switch in your brain that says, don't kill yourself. Don't
Yeah.
commit suicide. Don't do this terrible, atrocious thing. There's better things on the side of tomorrow that you have to look forward to. There's a switch in your brain that says, don't do this thing. And the psychological antipsychotics and medications actually have on the label, not only that you're far more likely, like very, very statistically, far more likely to commit suicide, but you're also far more likely to commit these types of atrocious acts. So then 85% of people not only have committed or utilized antipsychotics and are being, let's say, just mute that switch in your brain. But then you start to utilize modern technology by finding these people who are on antipsychotics on forums like Reddit. And you have the CIA or the FBI that goes in there and starts to manipulate those people. And then guess what? They have to show up at their door, a weapon that they can use.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's like just what you said. That's like old news. That's not even that serious. Like just being able to go on Reddit and start messaging somebody or just starting to push antipsychotic medications and then manipulate the person who's taking them to commit these acts. That's old news. There's, like you said, exactly patents out there today that show those types of things that can be utilized to not only, take that muted person, manipulate their thoughts through forums, but also in real life implant ideas that will make them commit acts that they would have never as a human being be capable of committing on their own today.
Yeah. Yeah. Wild stuff.
It's crazy, right? And it's just getting crazier. And then you want to tell me that the only way that I can keep up with the Joneses is by taking Elon Musk's Neuralink, a chip,
Oh, thank you.
and implanting it in my brain so that you can have complete Wi-Fi access to every thought that I've ever had and not even have to utilize the technology that you're talking about.
Yep.
It just
Yep.
gets so much more dystopian. Like the technology that you're talking about isn't even enough for them.
We have to take it a step further. Yeah. It's not enough
Exactly.
to get way to my brain and get me to do things. You have to be you have to be part of my mind.
Real time feeds. Like I don't want to have to be within 100 meters
Yeah.
of you to be able to manipulate you. I want to be sitting at a desk in Silicon Valley or in Washington, DC, in some bunker in the CIA.
They're AirPods, I think they're called, right? I don't
Mhm.
have them. They just patented new technology for AirPods to read your brainwaves. So it's reading your mind while it's in your skull. Insane. Insane.
It's crazy. And so I just went into like a new endeavor. I talked about how I'm an entrepreneur, right? And so there's been a lot of conversations around the manipulation and weaponization of EMF frequencies. And that's what you're
Yeah.
talking about. Like when everybody's talking about EMF, Wi-Fi radiation, poisoning, and the cancer being caused by your cell phone overuse, and how you should turn off your Wi-Fi at night. There's a lot of conversations about those things. And so I actually the hat that I'm wearing on my head is actually a sample of one of the very first products that I'm coming out with for a company called Ronin. And what we're doing is there's a silver lined fabric. So there's something called Faraday goods. And Faraday material is a silver lined fabric that you can actually interweave into the materials of your everyday shirts, hats, everything that you wear on a daily basis. And you can actually basically create a barrier between you and what that type of technology can do. So most people aren't aware of it. There is actually some type of material. It's a little expensive compared to everyday things. But if you're concerned about those things, and then a lot of people are just concerned about the regular AirPods,
Mm.
right? The amount of like the health effects of regular AirPods. And then you see that, yeah, I saw like just a really super brief Instagram post by somebody that posted about that. What do you need to read my brainwaves for?
Yeah.
Like
Curious.
you're already predicting basically everything that I would want to buy ever already at 75 to 80% accuracy.
Yeah.
What do you need access to my brain frequencies for? And how are you going to utilize that? Not even you. Let's say like, and I mean you by Apple, not you
Yeah.
specifically. But right, but how is Apple going to utilize that? But also, how is Apple going to monetize that data beyond themselves? I
Yeah.
don't think I'm not concerned about Apple taking my brainwave frequencies and trying to sell me a newer Mac because I thought about it.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
Right.
I have one of those the blankets you're talking about, and I put it on my lap when I have to like work on my laptop or edit. Yeah, they're pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something that like most people are not aware about the technology. And it's not like not even technology. It's just literally a certain type of fabric. And it's a certain type of fabric that's not created for everything. You know, the way that I came up with it was I actually heard on a podcast, RFK, so Robert F. Kennedy Jr., talked about the Wi-Fi radiation poisoning that he was actually litigating against a lot of people, where there was people coming to him and saying that, you know, they had this certain type of very aggressive cancer that was in their brain. And it was a result of, after they did so many studies, finding out that people were holding their phones up to their head, which you should never do, as people hopefully know now. You shouldn't hold your phone up to your head. You should put it on speaker. You should use wired headphones, whatever. But he found that people who held their phone up to their head a certain amount of hours per day were far more likely to get this certain type of cancer.
Yeah.
And so he started litigating consistently against this what he called either Wi-Fi radiation poisoning, 5G radiation poisoning, and EMF radiation poisoning. What most people don't know, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Like I feel crazy because like when I'm microwaving my food now, I stand like 10 feet away from the microwave. And
Yeah.
I just, there's no, but when you realize that you put your food in this magical box and you shut the magical door and you press the magical button, your food magically heats up. I don't know what the hell's going on there. I don't, all I'm told is that it's a magical box that you press a magical button and your food magically heats up. Well, what's happening there? What is the science behind it? What does that do to me? What does that do to my food? What does that do to the plate? What does that do to everything around you? And you don't know. You're not supposed to know. But you know what you're supposed to do? You're supposed to buy the microwave. You're supposed to heat up your food. Don't ask questions. Hold your cell phone up to your ear. Keep your Wi-Fi on at night. And don't worry about it. We got you. Of course we care about your health and safety. We're the government. Right. But what
Yeah.
they don't tell you is that the people that are responsible for the determining of like what level of EMF radiation is allowable, there's actually a governing body surrounding this, which is maybe a little bit, that's encouraging to know. There's 6 people that line the board of this board essentially within the government that determine the amount of allowable EMFs within technology that you have. There's a certain level of threshold that you cannot pass, or else you won't be allowed to sell it commercially. But 5 of 6 of the people on that government board are also board members or high-level executives of telecommunication companies.
Yes. Yeah. And I think it's something like, I think it's over $1 trillion that big telecom like lobbies Congress with every year. And all of the information, all the studies get buried. There's over 10,000 peer-reviewed studies that demonstrate harm to humans from EMFs. And all of that gets buried because big telecom is putting massive amounts of money behind this. And like you said, 5 out of 6 big telecom employees. Elon Musk, he went on Joe Rogan's podcast and Rogan was questioning him about the EMFs because of Starlink. And he straight up said, it's not a concern. You can wear I think he said a helmet full of cell phones and be totally fine. You're not going to get cancer. You're not going to have any issues. And we know, like scientifically, we know that that is not true. But him, along with our government, like they're all just working together, push these technologies. But I think the bubble's kind of bursting. I think people are waking up.
I think it's and this is the reason that I started my company. So the company's called Ronin Basics. It's going to come out. I have several products that are available right now. But the reason that I started this is because the conversation started to become very, very consistent in a lot of different individuals, whether it's Robert F. Kennedy Jr., whether it's Joe Rogan, whether it's Tim Ferriss, whether it's Andrew Huberman, but there's so many people that are out there speaking this truth today that weren't doing it 3 months ago. Right. It's becoming one of the most consistent things I'm seeing on X. I'm seeing all these viral posts showing the amount of EMFs being emitted from your laptop. Right. There's so many consistent conversations happening about this. So when I saw this, I think 6 months ago, when I started my endeavor in this, I went out and I looked. There's one company out there that really does the EMF hats. There's 1 to 2, maybe 3 companies that does the backpacks. There's 1 to 2 companies that does the phone sleeves and the laptop sleeves. Every one of them is so ridiculously priced and expensive, and there's no reason for it. So I was like, and again, by the way, all of it looks like shit. So it's like, so
It's not,
having
dude. I don't.
exactly. So having my background, so I was like, well, let me just see what I can do. I think this is a great opportunity to solve a real problem and to create a product that, especially in the apparel world, there's not too many problems that you can like actually solve with a hat or clothing or a backpack or things like that. And I was like, this seems like a great opportunity to create a great product that is actually affordable for people. The hats that people are buying right now from the company I'm talking about are $90.
That's crazy. The
A,
average person could spend that in this economy.
a $90 hat. And it looks like shit. I would never wear it. I would absolutely never wear this hat. So I was like, there's got to be a way. So I started to look at sourcing manufacturers and started to talk to people and source the fabric and do all these things. I was like, all right, so I think I'm onto something. So keep an eye out for that. But the idea is that there's very real threats that are around us because of modern technology. And here's the question I would pose to anybody that's out there today. If let's just say the government, if the government found out tomorrow, every single cancer patient that died was a result of modern technology, was a result of the frequencies that are being emitted from your cell phone. And I'm not saying this is the case. I'm just giving you a thought experiment. If you found out, let's start with the government. If the government found out that every single cancer patient that died was a result of modern technology, do you believe that they would be capable of making the decision to say, we are cutting off all of your cell phones, we're cutting off all of your Wi-Fi. We are not going to do this because we know it's killing, it's the number 2 cause of death in the United States today, right? Cancer. We're no longer going to allow telecommunications companies to offer Wi-Fi, to offer 5G, to offer cell phones, to offer any of this modern technology. We're going to have to figure out another way. Do you believe tomorrow they would make the decision to shut that down? Or do you think they would stifle that conversation, stifle that science to allow us to continue down this trajectory?
I think we know the answer.
We absolutely know the answer. Now, I even want to pose this to people because I would be conflicted with this as well. If I knew that every cancer patient that ever died, that ever got cancer was the result of modern technology, you as a person, me as a person, a father, of 3 children, would I stop all of my families, all of my own technological use as a result of that information? I don't know. And that's a very conflicting position to find yourself in. Like, do you really believe that you would be capable? Would you be mentally strong enough? Would you be able to, and I could tell you confidently, my answer would be no. I wouldn't stop immediately because my job depends on my ability to utilize internet. My job depends on my ability to use my cell phone. My job depends on all of these things, right? My family being able to eat, right? My family's going to die much quicker from not being able to eat and from being able to drink water because I can't pay the water bill if I lose my job because I can't pay for their food or their water. So it's interwoven into our society to the extent that regardless of the information that came out, even if we found out tomorrow that 30 to 50% of people that utilize technology every single day, more than 4 hours a day, which is far more or far less than the average person utilizes their cell phone if you're in Gen Z or millennials. Even if we found that out tomorrow, I'm not convinced at all that even 10%, even 5%, even 1% of people would stop their use of modern technology as a result of that information. And just like I don't know, an alcoholic who starts to make those realizations finds it out. I think we're far more addicted to technology. We're far more addicted to social media. We're far more addicted to doom scrolling on our phones than we are to the idea that we are actually wanting to do what's best for our bodies, what's best for our minds. And so I don't know where we go from here other than trying to find solutions like actually making those Faraday products mainstream, actually creating anti-technology tools that you can leverage to mitigate those things. And it's not just Faraday goods, it's not just the silver line fabrics. There's some like quite expensive electronic devices, which I guess I don't know how that works out, that will mitigate EMFs, but it's a very consistent conversation that I think people should hopefully start having within their families and their communities. And we should at least start to bring awareness to, because I think that's the number one thing to solving almost any issue.
Yeah, and I agree with you 100%. I think people would give up alcohol and junk food before they gave up their doom scrolling and their social media and technology.
100%, right? We're way
Oh,
more
yeah.
addicted to Instagram and X and TikTok than we are to literally any other substance on this earth today. And the effects of TikTok and Instagram and X are not nearly that of the actual physical effects of the frequencies that are being emitted as a result of the utilization so close to your body.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting rabbit hole to go down. I don't think most people are ready for that conversation, but I do think that there are some real, go buy the $90 hats. I don't care. Go buy the $200 phone sleeve. I don't care. But at least be aware of the idea that these things are out there that can help you solve this issue. And if there's a company out there, there's a company out there that can help you solve that issue at a much lower cost, definitely pursue it, because I think it's a worthwhile endeavor to start to wake up to those ideas. And I think that just as we've seen with COVID, just as we've seen with the pharmaceutical industry, the military industrial complex, there is a telecommunications industrial complex that is out there right now lobbying, like you said, billions of dollars to try to manipulate you into believing that this is not an issue. But there's a lot of studies out there, and there's far more being conducted today and tomorrow than have been conducted in the past. But there's a lot of studies out there that show that there is a serious correlation and causation between the technology that you use and the health outcomes that you have.
Absolutely. Let me know when you're ready to drop your company. I'll happily promote it.
I got you. So one of the things that I've seen you talk about, Brianna, a few times is the moon landing, right?
Oh, yeah.
The very convincing video evidence that we have seen from the United States of America NASA program. So speaking about the tarnishment of legitimacy within our institutions today as we know them, what caused you to question the moon landing? Like, what are the main, like, you have to point to 2 to 3 things that's like, hey, here's what made me believe this is absolute horseshit. What made you think that, as you know it? Because I've seen several of your videos and they're very convincing.
Thanks. Yeah, there's a long list of things that are inconsistent about the moon landing. And this is so controversial. Like people want to fight you on this. They get really emotional because it's like supposed to be this epitome of American excellence and American innovation and this
Right.
wonderful milestone in our history. And they don't want that illusion shattered. But one of the main things is the fact that we had, I believe it was a 0.17% chance of getting past the Van Allen radiation belt, even with all of the quote unquote protection that they put on the ship. And somehow we made it through. And the explanation given, I dug and I dug and I tried to find like a scientific explanation for how they got past the radiation belt. They say, we went fast, which is just absurd. Like, oh, okay, sure, you went fast. But, we have, I forget his name, but he's one of the astronauts at the International Space Station, and he slips that we haven't even made it past low Earth orbit ever. And so there's things like that all over the place. There was a video that came out from NASA not that long ago talking about they don't even know how to get past the radiation belt yet without people, with just their technology, their ships. So yeah, a lot of inconsistencies there. I think the footage would have been very easy for them to create in a film studio. It's super primitive, it's super fuzzy. People say if you speed it up, it looks like they're walking at normal speed. Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting one for sure.
100%. So the Van Allen radiation belt. So the idea behind that NASA gave is they said that it's a lost technology. That was their response because when people asked them, why have we not gotten to the moon recently? And why is this Van Allen radiation belt an issue today compared to what it was in the 1970s and 80s? Why is this an issue? And why were we able to overcome it 50 years ago? And why are we not able to able to overcome it today? They say that, well, we lost the technology. We lost the schematics. We don't have the capabilities of doing what we did 40 years ago. Back when we used to use what was it? Like a tin can and a string to talk to each other before it's modern cell phones. You want to convince me, they think we're so stupid. That's really you saw that with COVID. You see it with the moon landing. There's so many other examples of this, but the way that they try to talk to you about the Van Allen radiation belt, and I'm not intelligent enough when it comes to space to be able to explain it very well, but people should go look it up. It's essentially a certain altitude that you go past the atmosphere that causes all of the, I don't know, I'm sure it's like the instrumentation and the capabilities of actually surpassing this to be able to continue past this certain altitude above the atmosphere to allow them to actually reach the moon. And to your point, they basically state that we don't know, right? Like they didn't have unbelievable documentation and everything surrounding the actual building and infrastructure that went into creating the moon landing. And so yeah, it's so crazy to me that they want to try to continue the lie. It's like abusive spouse that tries to like gaslight you enough into thinking that you're really, really dumb to think that I was cheating on you for so long, but really you like knocked on the window of the car and saw them in there together, but they're trying to gaslight you into believing that that's not really what happened and you were dreaming, right?
Yeah.
It's so insulting to think that. And like if we were able to make it to the moon, and you actually saw there was a guy named, his last name's Sibrel. He's like the number one guy when it comes to the moon landing. He's done a ton of research on it, and he actually got face, punched in the face by I don't. It wasn't Lance Arm. It wasn't Lance. uh,
It's Aldrin, right?
yes, Buzz Aldrin. Thank
Yeah.
you. Buzz Aldrin punched him in the face. I think it was like the late 90s or the early 2000s when he was doing this deep dive into the moon landing. And he went up to him and said, I want you to swear on this Bible. I have a
Mm.
Bible right here. I want you to swear on it. And he just gets punched right in the face as a result of going up to this guy and trying to like have him just swear on the Bible. Just, you know, convince me like every other lawyer has put their hand on the Bible and lied to me before in a
Yeah.
legal setting.
Yeah.
He couldn't do it. He chose violence instead of telling the mistruth, which is that we weren't capable of going back then, which is what it absolutely appears to be. All of the footage that was essentially propaganda that they pushed out as a result was faked. And you see that by all of the evidence that is presented between the shadows of the light that's intersecting between I even saw something today before we had this conversation that was there was like a fly that people zoom in on the moon lander. There was a community notes around that, to be fair. So I'll give you that, but it said it was fake. But again, there's so much weirdness around the moon landing. And I don't think like why do you think that is? Why do you think that we went to the extent that we did if it is fake? Let's just say it's fake and let's accept that. Why do you think the government would do that?
I mean, it was thought at the time that whoever got to the moon first would win the Cold War. So there was sufficient motivation to get up there first and intimidate, Russia by saying we're going to put weapons, or there was sufficient motivation to get to the moon first. So I think that was probably it. I think everyone in power probably was in on it and knew what was going on. And I think NASA, like the only stupid people are us, the people. Like we're the ones that are always out of the joke. But I mean, I'm sure everyone. And I think the reason they probably get so angry to the point of punching people who ask questions, is because not because they're hurt that someone would ask that question or frustrated their work is delegitimized, but because it's like a sore subject. They've been keeping this secret for so many years. My great grandpa was actually friends with Buzz Aldrin. I never met him, obviously, but I wish
Sure.
I could have. I'd have some questions for him.
That's
Yeah.
crazy. Yeah. So you alluded to it right there. It's like the Cold War was an interesting time. And what a weird flex. Like
Yeah.
it's like you're gonna get into a fist fight with another kid in middle school, and you're like, well, I bet you I can race you to the store down the road and get back before you can.
Yeah.
And you have your like mom Photoshop an image of you selfieing next to the store instead of actually like racing 25 miles down the road. It's such a weird flex. Like, why was that the thing that people wanted to do that proved that we were substantially technologically advanced more than the Soviet Union?
Yeah. I think it was thought that they would put weapons on the moon, right? If the Russians got to the moon, they'd put space weapons up there and they'd win the Cold War. Which obviously no one's put weapons on the moon. I don't think we've been to the moon, but yeah, I think that was the thought at the time.
It seems like we probably should have spent that money elsewhere. Like again, it just goes back to the weird flex conversation. Like it makes literally no sense why that was the weird Cold War. Like it wasn't like creating a new technology. It was like, I bet you I can race you to that fence and back faster.
Mm.
Only
Yeah.
that fence is in Italy and you'd actually have to swim across the Atlantic Ocean to get there. And everybody knows that you can't actually do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And also correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think any other nation has put a quote human on the moon before. Like it's just us still all these years later. And the Apollo
Correct.
program, which now, and we
Right.
lost the technology and we lost the tapes. And like, what? It's insane that anyone actually believes it happened.
50 years ago. It's
Yeah.
like the RF, like the Kennedy assassination. It's like, we didn't do that, but we're also not going to release any of the information surrounding it.
Yeah. We
So
didn't do it, but we're not going to clear our name.
exactly. We're not going to convince you, but we're going to
Yeah.
tell you, and you're going to believe us that we didn't do that.
Yeah.
But we did do this thing. And we're going to tell you, and you're going to believe us, but don't question it, because if you do, we're going to call you a conspiracy theorist.
Yeah.
And
Crazy.
so you see like Elon Musk trying to get to Mars, and you see the way that he tries to frame it as the colonization of Mars for the purpose of mitigating catastrophes for the human species.
Yeah.
And I think if you take it from like a book sci-fi perspective, it makes quite a bit of sense to be able to become an interplanetary species. Because if there is some sort of catastrophic event, you look at what happened with the 16 times the size of Earth with the sun and the solar flares that are happening right now as we speak, allegedly. Right. If that got much worse, something could happen to the Earth. And if that was the case, then it would be much better off if we at least had an Adam and an Eve somewhere on Mars that would be
Yeah.
able to help us out. But also, if you look at it from like an elitist perspective, you see that Mark Zuckerberg just built a 40, almost $40 billion bunker, like unbelievable amount of money that all of these elitists are creating far below the surface of the earth. And it seems to me to be a little bit more of a escapist type of ideology that allows people who are far more financially set to offset the risk that they're going to be at the butt end of the joke that is the end of humanity.
Yeah. I would agree with you. I don't know if you've seen the show The 100. It came out years ago, and I was like a teenager when it came out, and so I loved it because it was created as like a teen show. But basically, they send down so there's nuclear war on Earth and everything is destroyed and it's radiation soaked. And the only people that survive are the people that fit in the bunkers. And there's only like a few bunkers throughout the whole world. And so the rest of the people went up to space. And so they've been living in space for however many years. And so they send these 100 teenage kids down to see if the radiation's gone so they can live on the land again. But yeah, it's the same idea, like what you're talking about with the wealthy who go and hide in their bunkers. Everyone else dies. And then some of them go to space. And then, oh, we're going to colonize the earth again. How cute. And yeah, I think that's it. If you pay enough, you can survive the nuclear war. And yeah. But I see these people as godless, and in their mind, that's where things are going. In my mind, that's not where things are going. And I personally don't fear death at all. So I'd rather die in a nuclear war than live in a bunker, honestly. But yeah, I think these people are perpetually afraid. And so they build their bunkers. And I think Elon Musk is selling this dream of we're going to go to Mars and democracy. And he talks about how Mars would be ruled, in a democratic way and for the people and all this. It's not for the people. Like he's going to bring his elitist friends. Like it's so silly.
When you look at like how much time does Elon Musk have left? And you look at the trajectory of longevity. You look at, the lifespan and age of people that we could potentially live to, let's say, I don't know. I'm 30. So based on the trajectory of life, maybe I should be able to live to 110. Let's say. And maybe if AI works out well enough and Elon Musk does a great enough job, and so does Sam Altman, maybe it's 150. But Elon Musk probably has a runway. I don't know how old he is. He's probably mid 40s, early 40s, mid 40s, 50s.
Yeah,
Doesn't look too bad. Doesn't look too bad for 50. So let's say he has, if maybe they're gonna put his brain in some sort of freezer or something. But let's say he has 60 years, 70 years left to live. He can do so much in that time, in a time where technology is expanding so rapidly with AI. And for most people who don't know this, Elon Musk was a initial investor of OpenAI. He was one of the very first people alongside Sam Altman being the Y Combinator, Silicon Valley VC venture capitalist founder of OpenAI, but him and Elon Musk started OpenAI together, and so Elon Musk quam, right? And again, you have to look at the theatrics, like how much of this is actually real and how much of this is Jersey Shore reality TV theatrics to convince you that you should implant the brain chip that the good guy gives you, and don't use that bad chat bot online that the bad guy gives you, right? There's so many implications of this. So when you look at the amount of time, effort, and energy that and outcome potential that Elon Musk has, it's a very real possibility, and maybe not if you look at the Van Allen radiation belt, but the potential that he has to take the technology and the rapid prototype testing that he's doing within SpaceX today and try to colonize a different area. But who's going to go there? Like, who's going to be the very first people that get there? And who's going to be the very first people that get there in the next 50 to 70 years? And what's the second that, if we've seen anything else from the humanitarian human perspective, or even Homo sapien perspectives, or whatever you want to call it, the nature of humanity is that we become tribalists. If he starts to colonize Mars, and we're here on Earth as the lonely peasants, there's absolutely going to be some type of dispute, right? Some type of tribalism, some type of idea that we are better than them, and here's why, and here's what we need to take from them. And it gets to be this like weird sci-fi, terrifying dystopia. And I'm not sure that when you go back to the godly perspective, that was what was intended for us to begin with. It
Yeah.
wasn't that God gave us the Garden of Eden and the land of Mars. It's like, no, God gave us the Garden of Eden.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I don't see that as like, I mean, maybe I'm foolish, but I don't see that as like a real thing. Like, I don't see us going to Mars and like living on Mars, at least anytime soon. I think it's another bunker for sure.
A deep, deep bunker next to Mark Zuckerberg, who's, to be fair, trying to be way cooler than he actually is more recently.
Yes.
And so we talked about a little bit Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And so I want to hear your piece. What is your thoughts on Robert F. Kennedy Jr.? Do you think he's a legitimate candidate? Do you think that he's somebody who's going to pull votes from one party or the other? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I don't really see him as a threat, at least not to Trump. If anything, he'll take some votes away from Biden, but I don't see him as a serious candidate in this election. Obviously, I personally won't be voting for him, and I don't agree with a lot of his stances on things. I think people on the right really jump on his bandwagon because of his stance on the COVID vaccines, but he's always been a super, super avid environmentalist. So he's 100% into this climate change hoax. The policies that he would push as a result of that, I do worry about. Obviously, he's not pro-gun the way that we are. He supports abortion up until birth. I think he said recently. Yeah, I don't agree with a lot of his policies. He's still very pro-vaccine. He said it himself. He, quote, emphatically pro-vaccine. All his kids are vaccinated. It's just the COVID vaccine that he has a problem with, which is fine. But I see him as very, very much a part of the Democrat Party, even if he's running as an independent. And I think people on the right embracing him is a little, not premature, but I don't think people are really researching like they should.
Sure. Yeah. And I think I almost fell into that trap a little bit. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to me was somebody who seemed like I tend to be a little bit hesitant to identify myself as red or blue or Democrat or Republican. I like to keep an open idea about most ideas. I tend to be far more conservative than I am liberal, obviously, when it comes to social issues and financial issues. But I tend to be more libertarian than anything,
Mhm.
where I think most often than not, the government's absolutely fucking atrocious at basically everything that it does. And
Yeah.
so we had it when I was in the military. So I was in the Air Force. I was an air traffic controller in the Air Force. And we had a bowling alley on base. It was the only, yeah, super random. The, it was the only piece, it was the only entertainment on base at all. There wasn't a movie theater. There wasn't literally anything at all. They had thousands and thousands of individuals that were on base that only had one piece of entertainment. And do you know what happened to that bowling alley? It got shut down because it wasn't profitable.
Wow.
The United States government cannot successfully run a bowling alley.
The only form of entertainment.
The literal monopoly on fun on an entire military base. They could not run a bowling alley successfully. And guess what? Their beer was cheap. Everything was like, it was not expensive at all. They were just absolutely atrocious at business operations. And it opened my eyes up to the idea that the government is just terrible at everything it does. And so that brought me in, then many other reasons, but that's one particular thing that I can point to historically that like made me think that like, man, the government's just really bad at stuff. There's not
Yeah.
one thing that I can point to that the government does well. So when I looked at Robert F. Kennedy Jr. In some of the things and some of the ideologies, mostly his positions on COVID and vaccines and some of the things that he talked about there, it was intriguing. And I think where he lost basically everybody who was right of center was with his VP pick.
Yeah.
She is the ex-wife of a Google executive, like the guy who started Google.
Yeah.
Probably the worst pick he could have made at all. I guess Tulsi Gabbard said no to him, which maybe makes it make a little bit more sense, but absolutely atrocious. Every single comment section I look at of RFK, he's just getting roasted about his VP pick. And so I completely agree with you, though. I think as of today, came out and started to say that, oh, I don't agree with abortion up until full term, which is like the most terrible, atrocious thing you could ever say in general. Is like, I don't think you should be able to kill babies when they're the largest they could be until full term. Like it just. And then you look at his gun policies. I don't think his gun policies were as I guess, as ridiculous as his abortion policies. His gun policies were essentially that. I think the one quote that everybody points to for him is that if Congress or if Senate was essentially to put a bill across my desk, I would sign it if it had to do with an assault rifle ban.
Yeah.
That was like the quote. And it's like, yeah, don't do that. But also,
Yeah.
I don't see that happening. I'm a staunch Second Amendment advocate. I have a very beautiful Bravo company rifle upstairs and two other, I've lots of weapons. I'm a military guy. I go shoot, I train, all of that stuff. So you're not going to win my vote by saying those things. But I also think there was something to that he had something behind him that made people believe that he was a reasonable uncle.
Yeah.
I think that's like the best way to describe him is he was like, you have your dad and your great grandpa. I don't know what to describe Biden as. Like your dad and your great grandpa arguing, and both of them are like a little over the top and ridiculous. And then you have your uncle coming in. He's like, hey, you're ridiculous here. Here's why you're wrong here. And he seemed very reasonable in a lot of situations. And then you saw some of the things that came out, things like his
Yeah.
gun policies, things like his abortion policies, things like especially his VP pick. I think that to me, as somebody who was probably, I voted for Trump. I will vote for Trump. But there was a very specific time period where I was very much so considering, and I think that's probably the same for a lot of people, a big percentage of the United States of America that was considering a vote for RFK, that were like, maybe he's the guy who can be the reasonable uncle that can come into office and have a reasonable opinion. And he's very intelligent. And he wrote the book about, literally, actually wrote the book about how terrible Fauci was. That's
Yeah.
factual. Right.
I think that's why a lot of people like him. But for me, like all this stuff that's coming out now that's causing people not to like him, it's not a surprise to me at all because he's always been consistent in what he believes. So his VP pick, his stance on abortion, like none of that is a surprise to me. Because if you actually research, his history, that's who he is. He was a
Right.
huge Hillary Clinton supporter, voted for her over and over and over again. Like I expect it. I expect him to have democratic policies and have more of a liberal perspective on things. Yeah.
For sure. And so, wrap that up with a bow. I'm absolutely not voting for RFK, but I do think actually that the best thing that could have ever happened for Trump is that RFK grabs a extremely liberal VP
Yeah.
that all of the conservatives are against, that
Yeah.
all of the liberals love. And you poll just 10%, just 10% of the votes from the liberals, from the left. And I think that he's going to poll maybe less than 2% of the conservative vote at this point. I think he lost a huge, very large portion of the right as a result of his VP pick. I know, again, nail in the coffin for me. I didn't hear about the abortion opinion because that would have been it as well. Biggest thing lingering me was like the gun positioning, and the actual quotes that I had heard on that were very, unconvincing in the way that it was like completely going to create
Yeah.
my vote to be one side or the other. But I absolutely believe the best thing that could have happened to Trump, absolutely, was RFK choosing the VP candidate that he had chosen. If he had chosen Tulsi, I think that there would have been a real concern. I don't think that would have obviously won in any way, shape, or form. I don't think he's going to win still, but I
Yeah.
don't think that he would have won enough of the conservative vote to become, even nominal. But
Yeah.
I do believe now he did the thing that's going to make him a considerable potential vote for the Liberal Party.
Yeah. I would agree with that.
I think there's probably far more liberals and Democrats who are like, maybe I should question my opinion than there are probably conservatives after we've been right and right and right and
Yeah.
right over the last 4 years. But if you had to point to something, anything at all from that is maybe a little bit not towing the line of the conservative party, is there anything at all that you can think of that maybe is like, hey, I don't fully subscribe to this idea or this ideology that maybe is more mainstream conservative than not?
Sure. I mean, I don't kiss the ground that Israel walks on. Obviously, I will never support Hamas, and I don't necessarily agree with everything the left has to say about Palestine. But I do think that Israel is way out of line, and I see Israel as the creation of the Rothschilds. I don't see biblical Israel as being a geographical location or a government. I think that I'm in agreement with the New Testament when it says that Israel is, part of the church is part of Israel now. We're a people group grafted in. And so it's not like a nation state. It's not Benjamin Netanyahu or a specific piece of land. So, yeah, I'm definitely not. I'll probably never work in the conservative world because of that. But yeah,
For sure. And I think beautifully stated. And I think that's something that a lot of people that you say the conservative world, right? Like the mainstream conservative. God, how many people have we seen be sent over to Israel
yeah,
recently? Like how many mainstream, like you talk about, again, the Daily Wire, the PragerU's, all of those guys are literally getting funded and given videographers to send them over there. And
yeah,
so I appreciate that statement because to me that like I'm very, very much so in the same boat. I don't see the argument that one side is the good guy and one side is the bad guy. And that is
Yeah.
absolutely the narrative that we're being told, and even funded. You start to see some of the themes of the larger mainstream influencers and even the campaigns that are being ran there.
Yeah.
That's like, uh, I, I'm sorry, guys. Like, I'm not going to sell my soul based on wartime policies of somebody and it came out today that I think it was NATO or UN came out and said that, oh, we were wrong by 50%. That was their, did you see that article? There was an article that came out and said it wasn't 16,000 women and 20,000 children. It was 8,000 children, or it was 8,000 women and 10,000 children.
Yeah.
Like we cut our numbers in half.
Yeah.
It wasn't that many innocent children and women. It's like, okay, so you're telling me as an American citizen that I'm supposed to enthusiastically fund the murder of 8,000 women and 10,000 children. I just can't get behind it. I don't see why so many people, unless it's monetary, and they must be getting, and if you're like me and you're like you, I'm not sure how much money you would have to flash in my face for me to sit here in front of you and lie to you and say I'm okay with 10,000 children dying. Like I said, I'm a father. I have 3 children. You cannot put enough money in front of me that you
Yeah.
can tell me that I'm going to push this idea that what one party is doing that is absolutely atrocious, that is absolutely against the Geneva Convention, that is absolutely against the ideology that we utilized when we were in Iraq and we were in Afghanistan, when we were fighting terrorists with a surgical knife, as opposed to what they're using in the IDF today. I can't get behind it. And I see so many people that I respected through COVID that just showed you who are the warmongers, right? And we even saw it with the Ukraine. Like, it was so encouraging to me being maybe I'm just a dirty hippie from the 70s,
Or we're
but
not.
maybe, right? It was,
Yeah.
maybe I'm just a dirty hippie and I'm just generally anti-war. I don't see very many cases where you can argue to me that war is a good thing, that there's
Yeah.
not a different way of going about it. And so when you look at what's happening in Israel and Palestine, and there's an argument to be made, exactly what you said. I don't agree with October 7th. I do believe the IDF had plenty of awareness of it as of the American intelligence reports that were given to them almost 2 weeks prior to these terrorists coming over with 20-foot fans behind them,
Wow.
and that they eventually were able to shoot down 300 plus drones that are the size of,
Yeah.
a foot by a foot. Right.
Yeah.
You can convince me that the IDF wasn't aware of the 30, 40, 50, however many terrorists on fans
Yeah.
were flying over the border, but then try and tell me that you were able to shoot down at 99% efficiency the drones that were flying over the border from Iran and the however many hundreds of missiles that were being shot over the border by Iran. And then they just called it a wash. Like,
Don't ask.
well,
Don't ask question.
how are you able to shoot down 300 plus drones, but you missed 100% accuracy? You missed all of the dudes on fans
Yeah.
flying over your border
Flops.
and took 6 hours to respond to it.
Mm.
And it's the same way that you look at, I don't know how much research you've done into the actual evidence of Pearl Harbor and some of the information that we've had on that when you go back to that time frame, but it's very, very reminiscent of what happened there. And
Very
so,
much.
yeah, and when you look at the amount of information they had, you look at there's a argument to be made that they were pretty well aware of what was going to happen, and they were very well capable of making
wartime decisions to shoot every single one of those terrorists down flying over the border, that they were right sitting there potentially waiting for and watching leading up to it. And so,
Yeah.
no, absolutely, I think that's a great response. And that to me has been one of the major things that to me has woken there actually probably wasn't a single thing that I could point to from the conservative party that really made me question whether or not I was like on the team.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
And maybe if you go back, there's probably, I'm sure, several other instances of it. But
Yeah.
the one thing to me that stood out was like, but here's a better question for you. Why do you think that is? Why do you think there's a institution behind the conservative party that is pushing? I can't tell you how conflicted I am watching these protests on college campuses. Like I look at these protests and I'm somebody who's not like completely, I'm not I would say I'm pro Palestine, anti Hamas, anti Israel. Right?
Yeah.
Like
And
that's where I would position myself. And so when you look at that situation that's happening, and then you look at the people that are demonstrating at colleges, it's like, okay, I get the bleeding heart of the left. Right? I think there's a very famous quote that says, show me a show me a young liberal and I'll show you somebody without a brain. Show me an or I'm sorry, this is how it's stated. It's show me a young conservative and I'll show you somebody without a heart. Show me an old liberal and I'll show you somebody without a brain.
yeah.
That's a very famous quote. And the idea is that like I totally get where some of these people are coming from, where they're like, oh yeah, I'm gonna show up to this, it's a genocide, it's this and that. And I think genocide is being misused. What is the one thing that you would say to conservatives, and what is the one thing that you would say to liberals about what's going on in Israel and Palestine?
I would say to both sides, question everything. Like, why are you so eager to trust either the Palestinians or Israel? Like, why are we so quick to jump on bandwagons? Like, question everything. And I think we would find that we agree on like 90% of issues if people would just start asking questions.
100%. And I think that's like the same across the board, right? Don't wholesale wear the jersey. Never
Yeah.
wear the jersey ever.
Yeah.
The second you put on the jersey, it's 10 times harder to take the jersey off than it is to
Mm,
put it on. And so question everything, even when it comes to COVID, when it comes to Israel, when it comes to Palestine. And I think we saw that through the differentiation of the influencers who wholesale bought the Israel narrative, then questioned both sides of things. And I think that to me is encouraging as we move forward, as we move into, what some people believe is like potentially more war- terrible, terrible situations that could come up. Right. A lot of people predict those, as we move towards the election, as we move towards these more contentious issues that are coming up. A lot of people are saying, it's just going to get worse. There's going to be this. It's going to be a breakout of this. The United States is going to get involved in this. Question everything, right? Because
yeah.
I don't believe in any institution anymore. I don't believe in the CIA. I don't believe in the FBI. I don't believe in the United States government as I used to. I was a very, very patriotic individual. That's why I joined the military, was literally to serve my country. But you should question the narratives that are coming out from every major institution, because every major institution is driven by money,
Yes.
right?
100.
And you hear that like narrative of it's the root of all evil. And I don't think that has to be the case, but I do believe in most times it is the case, because money equals power, and power corrupts all.
Mm,
And so question everything, question the narratives that you're being spoon fed. I think everybody's pretty much aware about the mainstream media at this point, but I don't think everybody's aware of the influencers, right? Everybody started to buy in wholesale to the influencers that they started to buy into, who were specifically just pro or anti-vax, right? You saw
yeah.
that with RFK, right? everybody's like, oh, he's anti-vaccine. He's this, he's that. He must be telling the truth about this. It's like, well, maybe he was right on this thing, but you should still continually question an individual on every subject that comes up, right? Because whether they're anti-vax, but they're pro-Israel, every state at every position should be questioned. And I think that's the only way to get through this information age, right? The difference between the industrial revolution and the technological revolution is that everything moves so fast. The life cycles of news, all of it is so quick, and it's so easy to buy into one thing and get drawn into the narrative. Like, again, I think RFK is just such a perfect example that I myself fell into. And so I think that's a great way to put it. So again, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you from the bottom of my heart. I hope you have a good day. Where can everybody find you?
You can find me on Instagram at Bryanna X Robinson, X at Bry Robinson. And then TikTok, I got taken down. So my new TikTok is now at Bryanna, California. I just made it like brand new. So hopefully it'll be around for a bit.
Awesome. Well, I love your content. I love talking to you. Thank you so much. I would love to have you back on again. And I hope you have a great day.
Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Adams Archive.